yeah, you sound great.
Okay, yeah. I'm always so nervous about like, you know, Zoom live, anything. Yeah.
Oh, I feel it. I've had enough like to
Yes.
be like, whatever, we'll get over it. Alrighty, we're live, everybody. Welcome if you're joining us live. Welcome if you are not. I am here with New York Times bestselling author 2-time, actually, as of her new book, Tiffany Jackson. Tiffany, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Tiffany D. Jackson. I'm a thriller/horror author. I'm the author of Allegedly, Mondays Are Coming, Let Me Hear Rhyme, Grown, White Smoke, and my newest novel, The Way to Blood. It's sort of backwards in my camera, so hopefully you see it like normal.
Oh, no, it's right side for me, so I think you're good.
Okay. All right. But I am excited to be here to talk to everyone. I have done NaNoWriMo, in the past. So, I think I have some tips or tricks or something. It's clearly it's worked for me. So let's do this.
Yes, I love it. I love that energy. All right, so let's kick it off. What is a day in your writing life like?
It really truly depends. Right now I The Way to Blood just came out about 3-ish weeks ago. So I'm still in like a touring phase right now. Typically, I guess a good day is Mondays. Mondays, I wake up, I check all the emails I've probably missed. I try to post some social media content. I answer any questions from my editor or my publicist. I try to, if I'm not actively drafting or writing, I'm typically editing. So I'm trying to get through edits right now of a project I'm working on right at the moment. I usually hand edit and then transfer to my Word doc.
Oh, wow.
So sometimes that's like a long process. And yeah, I also have to, tend to my very demanding dog and do like life things. So that's my typical day. I try to eat somewhere in between some of
somewhere in there.
Somewhere in there, yeah. I used to be a early morning riser. Now I'm more like I get at my desk at like 10. I try to finish around 6. I'm trying to do this whole like life balance thing.
It's a little trickier than it sounds.
Yes. But if I am on like a pretty hard deadline, I could be writing until like 11 at night, until like my brain completely shuts down and I have to go and sleep.
Until you can't keep your eyes open.
Yes.
I saw that you posted a picture of your dog like an hour ago and I was like, oh my God, so cute. My dog may make an appearance. He's a little blurry back there, but adorable. So kind of getting into more of your the writing piece of your day. For you, what comes first, characters or plot?
Plot. I'm definitely a plotter versus pantser. And not only that, like I feel like characters are like dead last in my development. Wow. I have this thing where like sometimes my characters will like in the edit notes I get from my editor, like after my first draft, he'll be like, yeah, this is great. I have no idea what your character looks like. And I'm like, right, yeah, we should know that.
A little bit.
Yeah, a little bit of that. Yeah. So I'm so focused on plot and making sure that, things are exciting and everything is happening the way it's supposed to, that I forget to sort of like give my character a personality sometimes. So that's usually like my last thing.
What draws you in about like your plots? Or I guess like what do you need to have in a plot for you to enjoy writing it?
The plot has to be, I want to say enticing is the word. Like, I want to be curious about the plot. Like, I want to have a lot of questions. And I feel like the plot also, because I write like thrillers and horror novels, I love for the villain to be like sort of not problematic, but like have a point. Yes. I like our villains to sort of like, almost like you want to be on the villain side sometimes. So that also makes me like, questionable villains. And, non-perfect main characters are like a big thing for me as well, too.
Oh, yeah. Whenever someone says villains with like purpose, I always think Azula from Avatar. To me, she's like the epitome of one of those villains.
Yes.
Even though she goes real hard, but
yeah.
So, how did your background in TV help you write novels? Like, what skills from that really supports your novel writing?
Oh, I am. So I started writing screenplays when I was, I think 15 or 16.
Oh, wow.
I picked up a craft book at a Barnes and Nobles. It's called Sid Field's, like, script writing. And so I really follow the Sid Field's script writing paradigm. So I write in a 3-act structure. I definitely make sure I hit all plot 1, plot 2, the midpoint, the climax. I sort of focus on that. And even though I'm writing a book, I still sort of like follow the same, like, template in terms of like timing. I make sure that, I hit a certain like plot point before like a certain page in the book.
Mm.
And definitely I feel like because movies and books are very much cousins or in the same sort of media family, but first cousins in a way. I definitely make sure that there is exciting cinematic elements in the book, because that's how exactly I vision all my books as movies. So I have like a specific like uh, ooh, sorry, my mom was calling me. A specific, this is life too. I get lots
Oh,
of
yeah.
calls. A specific like pattern in the book as well too. So, and a lot of times because I am like this sort of like screenwriter slash novelist, I always think like, oh, people should almost like expect things to happen because I'm literally following the same structure every book. I just change the devices I use. So there may be like a time warp change, or I play with time, or I play with media, I play with form, but otherwise everything is very still much like a 3-act structure.
That's so funny because I feel like, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but you are just like plot twist queen. So the fact that you follow such a structure that still allows for these like gasp moments is really incredible.
Yeah, that's what I was like. At first, I used to be like, there should be no surprises here, but I guess there's still room
Yeah.
for surprises, which is actually the joy of writing. Because I always say, and I've mentioned this in the past, that a lot of my plot twists have not been planned. Um, so they usually like come up around like draft 3 or 4,
Wow.
5 of the book. But the only book that had a plot twist that was like purposeful was White Smoke, and this is not even like it's not
Mhm.
even a spoiler, honestly. I mean, I guess at this point you all expect it, so every book has one. But that's the only book that was actually actively planned, but the rest of them were not. So it's I mean, that's actually the joy of writing, right? Like
Oh, yeah.
you have a roadmap, but you could take detours.
Yeah, like all writers are also readers, and we want to be excited like we are when we're reading. We want to like not
Yeah.
expect exactly what we're doing quite at the beginning, but find it out along the way.
Yes, exactly.
So let's see. On your website, you recommend authors become more resilient to push through like inevitable rejection that they're going to face. How do you recommend that writers go about becoming more resilient?
Um, this is gonna sound very simple, but I feel like you actively need to have a life outside of your writing.
Mm,
And I know that sounds like because when we all first like are starting, we're just like so like gung ho about our books. It's like everything is just about like getting to the finish line of like
yeah.
drafting and stuff like that. But having a well balanced life really sort of makes you a well balanced author, and you're able to sort of like accept the things as they come. And if you don't, you get like derailed by rejection, and that just like prolongs your process. So I oftentimes talk about like the joy toolkit, because inevitably you are going to be rejected
Oh,
by
yeah.
something. Anything, even if you had the red carpet rolled out for you at the very first draft of your book, there is still something that's going to go like wrong, and it may hurt your feelings or may derail you. You may be able like never be able to write another book again. um and so I oftentimes talk about the joy toolkit, which means like making sure that you have something that brings you instant joy. So whether it's your dog, or a certain type of food, um a movie, whatever it is, like just making sure that you keep your spirit up in the midst of everything, like while you're like actively like a part of like actively writing, can really like change the game. It's all about like self-care at the end of the day.
Oh, yeah. No, I totally agree. Cause like we can't control rejection, but we control how we react to it.
Yes, exactly.
So moving on to, we've hit some lows. Now we're going to hit the highs. What did it feel like to hit the New York Times bestseller list? When I wrote this question, you were only a one-time New York Times bestseller, and now you're a two-time New York Times bestseller.
Actually, I'm a three
You're
time.
three? What? Okay, wait, for
Yes.
what book? I was researching
Okay.
and I missed my research then.
So I hit the list for Grown,
Right.
White Smoke, and
Right.
The Weight of Blood.
What? Okay, yes. My research was before that.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was pretty it's I'll be honest, I'm always sort of like thrown by it because I'm always like, oh, like people like this book, oh great, like yay.
Yay.
And I'm also super like appreciative of like my readers, that they are so super supportive. So yeah, that honestly, that's the biggest high for me. It's not even so much the list. It's about the fact that such active readers are so super supportive that they like do reviews and stuff. Like I get like excited about like that stuff. Because you know, I truly didn't think I would even be this far. I thought I was only going to publish one book and then like, you know, call it a day. So I really am like, I'm in awe of still being here. Like, and so I'm more, you know, I'm more excited about the readers than I am about like making it on the list. And I know that sounds like so like, you know, like humble brag type thing, but like no, like like no, I'm thrilled. And especially like I especially love getting on the indie bestseller list. That's actually like even more important to me than the New York Times list because indie booksellers are like, you know, there are champions of like, you know, really selling our book. They like hand sell it. They're active readers, they're book nerds like us. And the fact that, you know, people are going into all these, you know, independent local bookstores and buying my book, it is like, as even like a double whammy in terms of like, you know, like the joy of it. So yeah, it's been such like a joy all around. So yeah, I guess that's like the bigger highs, yeah, for me.
Yeah. And it makes sense too that like connection with readers would spark more joy because, you know, you're writing really for readers, right? So
Yeah.
if you're just hitting the list but not exciting anyone, then I don't think those two things quite go together.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So let's see here. Going back to writing, what is a piece of writing advice you feel is not offered enough?
Hmm. Um, I would say I feel like this piece is like offered, but like oftentimes like it's misconstrued. I'm and I tell this to kids a lot too, like, you know, when I go and do like school visits and stuff like that, I often tell them that they should like one, start now, two, be like active readers in like the genre of that they're interested in, but also actively read in different genres. So like I'm very much like, you know, horror thriller girl, but you know, every now and then I will pick up, you know, a nonfiction book. I will pick up a book of poetry. I will pick up a fantasy novel that I'm not even big into fantasy, but I will pick it up because it just sort of like you take different craft tools from everything that you read. And reading honestly is your biggest like mentor, because you don't have those like active like mentors or like, you know, like I don't have R.L. Stein like sitting in the office with me like telling me what to write.
If only.
But you know, if only. But you know, reading his books or reading, you know, other people's books have really like inspired me. I tell people all the time, like I didn't go to school to get my MFA. I never took any like creative writing courses and stuff like that. Like I was strictly a film school nerd. So most of my training is in like writing books has been through craft books, workshops, and reading. And I would really actively say that reading is like the biggest thing that really helped me.
Oh yeah. I teach a lot of people in my other job how to write like business stuff. I'm like, just read. It won't feel like you're learning, but you are learning, and it's like
Yes.
incremental. So you'll get there and you'll look back at stuff you've read like a written like a month ago, and like, oh, like here's where I can improve that. And before you know it, you're
Yes.
growing. Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly it. And then also, like, knowing that not every book, like, especially when I was still like in the query process and stuff like that, I like acknowledged the fact that not every book was going to be published.
Mm,
Um, and kind of like settling with that, like, made it easier to like keep writing. I think
yes.
because sometimes people get so like caught up in that one book, like, this is the book, this is the one, and they don't think that maybe if it's not the one, it may be the one right after it, and they get so stuck on this one idea that they won't leave it to sort of explore other things. And I think that that's been like the detriment, to a lot of aspiring writers, is that they get so caught up in, and trust me, I have books that like I loved and I worked on incessantly, but I probably would have been further along in my career if I had, maybe put that book aside and tried another project while I let that book like marinate.
Yeah.
So I think that that's like something that to also like add to like, the Rolodex of like ideas of how to like become an author.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That really reminds me of your like, have a like a life outside of writing, because you have that balance, not only work-life balance, but like writing balance. You don't put
Yes.
all your eggs in one basket, so you can
Yes.
kind of enjoy all of them.
Yeah. It's really important to sort of like to stretch, to be like malleable. I think that's the word, but
That's what,
like,
yeah.
like, I think that's really important because like if you're not like this business changes,
Yeah.
and like I'm in it and I'm still like don't know what's going on half the time. Like no one knows like what's trending and what's not, or what's going to trend, like, you just never know. And like sometimes that book that you're like so like fixated on is like a vampire werewolf story, and then maybe people aren't doing vampire werewolf stories right now, but maybe they're going to do your next idea, which is like an assassin story, and assassins are really big right now, like, or like something along those lines.
Yeah.
I think that if you sort of like open yourself up to like maybe doing different things, you have a chance at a different outcome.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. 100%. 100% agree. Oh, you have a question from the chat. It's from Kate Lima. Have you ever experienced serious writer's block?
Yes, I did. For the first time during the pandemic, the early days of the pandemic
Oh
was the
man.
first time I experienced like hardcore writer's block. And it was, I think that made it even more to like everything made it even more terrifying. like,
Oh yeah.
uh, like I was, I was living in Brooklyn, um, like in New York at the height of the pandemic,
Mm,
where the streets were empty and everything was silent. All you heard was ambulances, and I could not think. And because I could not think, I could not write. So I was just sitting in this like silo, like vacuum of silence, in just this hysteria time. And before then, I never had problems with writer's block at all. I used to like when people would ask me like, what do you do for writer's block? I was like, I have no idea what that means. I've never experienced that. um I would always be able to write. I think that I'm one of those people who like I can write like that, or I could write a new story like that. I think maybe because it took me so long to get to this place of
mm,
being able to be like a full-time writer. So and I would say like, there's a lot of things you can do to kind of get out of a writer's block. And I always suggest like getting in the shoes of your character. So, for instance, if your character plays like softball, like join a softball league. If your character is into like weird art, join an artist class, or hit up some like weirdo museums. I know it's kind of difficult, like if your character is like based in space, to study the planets, or study like the star systems and stuff like that. Like Google Earth is like the coolest thing. So I feel like that's like one of the tips I always tell people is like just to like rest, like put your book aside and rest, like let it sit, and like you rest too, because like writer's block is honestly like, your brain being overworked.
mm, mhm.
It seems like your brain's not working, but your brain was actually overworked and it cannot think the way that you want it to think. So the biggest thing is to sort of like relax, to take some deep breaths, to like, sort of settle down, to take naps, to watch Netflix as much as you have to, and then do the work to sort of like kind of get back into the groove of your book.
Yeah. That's the refilling of the creative well, is what one of
Yes,
my podcasters likes to call it. Yeah.
yes, that is like ultimately like the biggest thing for me is to always like consistently refill the creative well. It's one of the reasons why I'm big on having a life outside of like just my writing. I'm big into traveling. I'm big into like, you know, hanging out with my friends because I know that these moments, like, I make it a point because I know these moments will like ultimately like feed ideas.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So which book of yours was the most difficult for you to write?
Uh, the most, see, difficult is so like different, like every aspect, right?
That's
So,
true. Yeah.
it depends on like what's difficult. So like for example, I feel like the most difficult book of all my books to write was probably Grown. Because Grown was actually the book that was like I'm closely like, you know, related to. Like
Mm,
that's the most like the book that like hit home the most because I was also in an age inappropriate relationship.
mm,
So a lot of those emotions that are in Grown is like a you know my own kind of like story in a lot of
mm,
ways. So that was really hard to write and you know also hard to read and reread and edit. There are chapters in the book that I refuse to read because it's just
mm.
sort of like it's staring me in the face. But then like I would also say like The Weight of Blood was also a difficult book to write because it was the first book I wrote solely in third person.
Oh,
Um, and I'm like a first person gal.
yeah.
so so switching to that and staying in that and staying like you know third person past like you know close like it was a lot to like kind of go through and then some people would like read like the contents in like my first book allegedly and think like that was probably really hard to write and it was in some moments. It was one of those times where you know I'd write a really hard scene and I would immediately like dig into my joy toolkit
Mm, mhm.
which you know when I was writing allegedly, I was watching a lot of Twilight, and I
What
don't
a
know
good
why
balance.
it was a good balance. It just helped. So yeah, that's like another thing that I like kind of like throw in there of keeping that balance.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Now I kind of want to go back, reread Allegedly, and then also watch Twilight at the same time and see see if
you'll
there's anything
see
that came through.
you'll see kind of like you know like I understand why people were like in love with Edward a lot of the time. I was like, yeah, I love this. Like I love this
That's
man. I
great.
love this sparkly man. Yes.
Oh, I could go off on Twilight, but I do want to focus on you. Um, I think, sorry, I'm pulling up the chat because there's a few more that came in.
Okay.
A few we have already answered, but let's see from Lena Rodriguez. Do you or did you ever experience imposter syndrome?
Yes. I still do currently. uh, I, I don't know what it is. It's something about the fact that like, you know, especially when people are like, you know, you're my favorite author. I'm like, ooh, you need to read more. Like that's my immediate reaction. My immediate reaction is to be like, there's no way. Like, have you read Zora Neale Hurston? Have you read 20 more? Like, there's no way that I'm your favorite author. So that's like the biggest part of imposter syndrome for me. I get so I like especially if I go to places or festivals and stuff like that and people immediately know me and I still introduce myself, they're like, we know who you are. And I'm like, well, hi, I'm Tiffany again. Like I just you know yes, I definitely get the imposter syndrome a lot. And you know, I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing to still sort of like be in denial of like or you know still be able to experience this joy like like you know I feel like I'm incredibly blessed to be an author. This has been my dream since I was like 4 and the fact that I'm here like you know as a full-time author that I'm not like you know still working my you know 9 to 5 or 9 to 9 because I was still working television at the time.
Oh man.
um the fact that I still am like here that I like my bills are paid, my family is healthy and that I you know like I'm have good relationships with my friends and everything like that and I still can like write and I still can like you know chat with you and stuff like that is an incredible blessing. So I'm yeah, I'm truly blessed by that. I'm incredibly grateful, and so it's one of the reasons why I probably still have this imposter syndrome is because I'm like this is real. Like I get to do this. Oh my god. Yes.
I feel like that is definitely better than being like, of course you should know who I am. Like,
Yes.
staying humble is always a better look, a better feel.
Yes.
Okay, so let's move into The Weight of Blood, which I read, I think, in 2 or 3 days, which is not my record for your books. Actually, I've read 2 of your books in a single day because I couldn't put them down. But we are talking about Weight of Blood today. For
Okay.
those viewers who have not read the novel yet, can you tell us what it is about?
Okay. So trying to like get my spiel together. So The Weight of Blood is my homage to Stephen King's Carrie. It takes place in 2014, and it's about a girl named Maddie who has been passing for white at the behest of her fanatical father. But a surprise rainstorm exposes her secret, leading to her classmates tormenting her and the moment going viral. But some of the classmates are really worried about the school looking racist, so they decide to host their first integrated prom, because originally proms were only black and white, even in 2014. But some classmates are not interested in changing this tradition, and so they have one more trick up their sleeve. But what they don't know is that Maddie still has one dark secret that's going to cost the entire town their lives. I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Got chills rehearing you say that. It's a great book for anyone who has not picked it up yet. Please pick it up. Whether or not you've seen Carrie is like, I think I had not seen Carrie, but I read the plot as I kind of was going along. And I
Yeah.
think any way that you experience the two together is like really magical. So definitely, I highly recommend.
Thank you.
So I feel like character names hold deeper meanings here. I'm always very interested in character names, especially your narrators of the novel, whether it's an illusion like Wendy, to portray different sides of a person like Kenny, who also goes by Kendrick. But I have a personal bias to Maddie, obviously.
Yes.
Why did you choose the name Maddie?
So her father is like a huge history buff. His name is Thomas Washington. Very into like history and very like into like the 1950s era. He has even a shop that's called like the Good Old Days. And one of the things that he does is always quizzes Maddie about, history, and sort of like constantly like pushing like the white agenda and like amazing how like white history is. And so obviously she named her after James Madison. And so Madison, Washington, like best presidents and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that was like one of the things like the name really like spoke to his love of history, US history, I should say.
Yeah. That's
Good question.
great.
No one's actually asked me that yet.
Oh, hey. Well, I don't know if my name wasn't Maddie, I don't know if I would have asked that, but I'm glad that I did and that my name is Maddie. Were there any other names that you considered or almost selected?
No, because even when I was still like plotting this book in my head, because this book is sort of like loosely inspired by a real event, I kept thinking about the way that they like the kids would tease her, and all I kept coming up with those mad, mad, Maddie, like mad, mad, Maddie, mad, mad, Maddie. Like that's like I kept thinking like they would call her mad, like as if she was crazy, and she wasn't crazy. So that was always like I knew it was going to be something mad, something. So yeah, that was the only thing that came to mind. And everyone else's names, I mean, I'm actually kind of like not the best at names. But this particular book, there's a lot of Easter eggs in there. There's a bunch of like names from like horror movies that I've like loved in the past, or Stephen King books that I've loved in the past. So, and some people have picked it out, and some people are like, it goes right over their head. But Maddie Washington was the one name that I had like, sort of like set.
I love it. I love it. Let's see. Can you talk to us a little bit about the correlation between identity and power in the novel?
Ooh, so basically, one of the things that this novel really explores is people's identity, like particularly these kids in the book, the sort of like main characters are in the book, that they're kind of exploring and kind of like exploring or questioning their identity and how much power that goes with it. So even like Wendy, who was dating Kendrick, and Wendy is white and Kendrick is black, and in her mind she is being like an ally and thinking that's going to get her these like brownie points, and then sort of like kind of questioning how that actually fits into her identity. Like, does she even have an identity? And then you have Madison, who all this time has been sort of like pushed on by her father to remain white and to completely ignore her blackness and hide it from everyone. And now she's been exposed, and now it's a question of like, well, what does that mean for my life, and how does that like change my future? And so she's starting to sort of think for herself, and that gives her a sense of power too, and that's also like helped her powers in a sense too. And then you have Kendrick, who is black but has always been around nothing but white kids. All of his friends are white, and they obviously treat him different and sort of have this microaggressions that happen, but he's ignored it because he knew that being with these kids protected him and gave him this popularity that he really wanted, but at what expense? And now he's like questioning the power that he has adapted because of just pretending like he was ignoring the N-word that was dropped, or the way that people would talk about even his sister. So I think that that's something to be said about the way people use their identity as a power structure, even in a school, like even in like a high school. So I think even the adults also have those reckoning moments in the midst of this too. And it becomes a question, like the theme of the book is really about the idea of, if everyone was allowed to kind of be themselves, like, would there be consequences? And so it's a question of like, like if Maddie was, considered to be black from the very beginning, would the town had end up, experiencing her wrath? And if she wasn't teased for that, like, like that kind of thing. So it's really, it digs deeper into the idea of owning oneself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you play really well with the podcast that's kind of interlaced within the story. Is like you can kind of pick up on these things. But I'm an English major, and I always, when I start to hear these layers and layers, my brain goes persuasive essay, go. So yeah, there's so much in there that you can pick out and make arguments about, and I love it. So going to we have spoken about that this is a fantastic homage to Carrie, but I also, saw some layers of the birds and even Matilda. And all stories' really central focus is the consequences of like controlling or really limiting a feminine power. But all these previous stories, Carrie, Birds, Matilda, were all helmed by men. So that sets you and The Weight of Blood apart. Where does your novel benefit from you, a woman, telling the story, and what other story? Actually, let's just start with that one, because this is this heavy question. Where does your novel where does your novel benefit the most from a woman telling the story?
I think so. I've heard this before. Basically, with a woman telling the story, you get a chance to experience a meatier version of the character building. Like, you don't have a one-dimensional woman, like girl, experiencing all this trauma. Like, you kind of like get to understand her thinking, why she is the way she is. And then sometimes that really, there is something to be said about own voices, in the sense of like a woman writing a woman. And not saying that, the original Carrie, which was Stephen King's first work, which not many people actually know that, because they always think like, oh, there's the others. No, that was his first book. And, his books have gotten better over time, obviously. So I think about that often. Like, that's a really good example of like, Carrie was your first novel. It was like a crazy fantastic story, and maybe it could have been more fleshed out, but at the end of the day it was still a fantastic story and like a quick read. And that's like a lesson for all of us aspiring writers, is that book was his first book and it is still iconic to this day.
Oh yeah.
Imagine that. So like you do get better over time. And so I think that's like the biggest thing that as a woman telling this story, and this also being my sixth book,
Yeah.
because I have gotten better over time with all of my books. Like though this isn't my favorite book that I've written of all of my books, because people always ask me this question, like, which one's your favorite? And I'm like, I had different things. Want me to pick my favorite child.
Yep.
I would say this is my best written book to date. And that says a lot when I've worked on so many projects up until now. So I feel like this is something that I really much hold on to in the sense of really honing in on all of my skills and everything I've learned for the last, like, 5, 6 years I've been doing this, is to kind of like step in my own power as a woman writing this book. So I think that's I guess one part of your question. And the other part was
what other stories would you want to see this shift reflected, kind of taking back the voice or the power?
I gotta think about that. I'm trying to think of something that's like horror based. That the woman is like, kind of like
the central
like character. And she's not like the victim, because I don't consider Maddie a victim. Like,
no.
She was a victim, but she took the hold of it's a book about revenge.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to think of another like story in the past that had that kind of theme and could be expounded upon. And I can't think of anything at the moment.
Well, if anything comes to your mind, let me know. But
Okay.
otherwise, we'll move on. So without giving the ending totally away, this novel does have like a pretty ambiguous ending. And every novel of yours that I've read seems to have an ambiguous ending. So you certainly seem to prefer them. What do you feel ambiguous endings contribute to the overall story that neat, clear endings do not or cannot?
I always kind of say that closure is a myth, that life doesn't actually have closure either. Even when you like let's say couples break up and you try to have that like closure conversation, it doesn't truly like solve anything. You just get like another answer, but it's only going to like lead to like 10 more questions or scenarios in your head. And so to me, I feel like it's a disservice to write a book that isn't truly based in like true life experience, especially since it's a YA novel. And I'm writing basically for teens.
Yeah.
And I hate underestimating how they feel and react to things. I'm also big on like, other people like taking the reins and like writing their own, or like, experiencing whatever they feel like no matter what, like I may give you it, there's someone is going to be upset at the ending. Like there is no perfect ending to any book. I don't know any book that hasn't had some type of criticism based on their ending. So to me, I'm kind of like, I mean, this is, I've left it open for you to decide how it should end. And I think overall, I feel like even in the original version, there was a bit of an open ending, like, yeah. And so I feel like I've done the job to take you this far, and anyone could do a fan fiction or decide what else should happen. I did write an epilogue, which I had released with the pre-order campaign. And so we're just waiting, and I'm going to post the epilogue. I just figured I'd give people some time to like read the book and not like be a huge spoiler.
Digest,
digest the book. And so I will post that somewhere and make it something that like other people can like, jump on and see. But yeah, that is really kind of the basis of like my thinking with endings. Is like, I feel like it ended, and it's good the way it is, and you could take where it is. But yeah, there's no like there's no such thing as closure. There's no such thing as like super happy endings. There's always going to be more questions. You're always going to see more. And who am I like then to like I'm not a mind reader also. Like I don't know what every other person's going to want something different. So I might as well end it the way that I would like to see it.
Yeah, I feel like your stories at the end where, you know, the not the message stops, but where the message concludes, if that makes sense. Like,
No, it does. It
yeah.
does. It's sort of like, okay, the message has been communicated,
Yes.
and there's nothing else to add to there's nothing else to add to the lesson or to the lecture.
Yes.
So take that as you will. And that's one of the biggest things about writing thrillers and horror and stuff like that, is like, especially for teens, is like you want to like show them everything. You want to put all the cards on the table and let them like decide,
Yeah.
basically, to make their own rational conclusions. Because once again, I feel like a lot of times we underestimate what people can handle, or
Oh yeah.
especially kids. And so I feel like this is a great opportunity for them to use their, deductive reasoning. And that's a huge life lesson in itself, because there's so many things that, teens, or, anybody honestly is going to face, and they need to be able to make rational conclusions rather than someone spoon feeding them that lesson,
Mhm.
spoon feeding them what they should and should not do.
Yeah.
And if you sort of explore it, if you show rather than tell, like that's the best way to sort of like raise active participants in the society, compassionate participants in the
Oh
society.
yeah. Building that critical thought in them
Yes.
through curiosity rather than this is how you do critical thought.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
So, what do you hope your readers will take away from The Weight of Blood?
The revenge is everything. No, but
Yes, good message.
I think the biggest lesson, or the biggest thing I want people to take away from, is that, kind of like what we were talking about earlier about identity and power, and how like you have more power than you actually truly believe. I also think that it's important to remember that Black people are not a monolith. You have
Mm.
3 Black people in this story, and they are all vastly different,
Mhm.
and in vastly different journeys and intersections in their finding their identity. So I feel like that's super important, and also to also recognize, what allyship really is.
Mm.
Um, Versus, performative allyship. And I think that's a huge part in it as well too. So yeah, I think those are like kind of like the bigger things I would like to people to take away from this book. Um, I can't think of anything else.
I think those are excellent things. I got a lot of that from the book. I got all those and more. So let's see. So moving kind of away from Weight of Blood, I have kind of a little random question, but do you think you would survive in a horror novel?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
What would be your uh what's the word I'm trying to look for? Like plan.
Um, I'm usually the one who asks the questions. Like if something doesn't feel right, or something doesn't look right, or something doesn't make sense, I'm immediately be like, what's that about? Like, what's going on? But like or if you my friends always laugh at me because I like lock down like my hotel, my house, like it's Fort Knox. Like
Yes.
I'm not playing.
Yeah.
Like I have super duper survival skills when it comes to even like just walking down the street. Um, I was taught to want, especially I grew up in Brooklyn, so like, there's definitely some like, street smarts that we adopt over the time. And
Oh yeah.
a friend of mine just noticed that I did this the other day, is that I walk, like when I'm walking down the street, I walk closest to like the inner street, and I'm constantly looking at like windows and reflections, because I'm looking to see if anyone's walking behind me.
Oh yeah.
And my friend noticed it the other day, and I was like, yeah, it's just like a thing I just do on the fly, because I'm just kind of like, I'm just making sure, because you just never know.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in constant state of alert at all times. And it doesn't help that I write these books, and I'm
I'm
just
sure
like
it
talking
doesn't.
my, yes, I speak to myself at half the time. But yes, I'm always in like war mode. So I feel like I'm the perfect person to have on your zombie apocalypse team.
Oh yeah.
Um, I also have an apocalypse kit. Like I'm just ready. Um, and I've always laughed because my friend Donald Clayton, like I think someone once asked her, like, what's in your zombie apocalypse kit? She's like, oh well, I'll definitely have a book. And I'm like, what are you gonna do with a book? Like, what are you gonna do with a damn book in during the apocalypse? Like you're gonna read to the hurricane, you're gonna read the
I don't
zombies.
think
Like, what are you doing?
so.
So
Just
yes,
throw it. I don't know. Paper cut.
yes, yes. That like you're just gonna be a like you can't come. You're a liability.
Well, I'm definitely following you when the apocalypse comes. So,
Yes, this is smart. This is a smart idea.
okay. So my last question, we have a lot of writers getting ready for NaNoWriMo in November. Do you have any
Mhm.
advice that you'd like to share?
I was up until like 2, 3 years ago, I was part of the 5 a.m. Writers Club,
Mm,
and that is honestly the only way I was able to get anything done. I used to wake up at 5 o'clock. I would write until about 8 o'clock. I would get ready for work. I took the train to work, so I was, writing on the train. I'd write during my lunch hour. I would write on set a lot. I would write when I'm, flying someplace. Like I always like got those words in. So I feel like, and even when I've done Nano in the past, that's always been like the way that I was able to sort of like, bank in those words. But the other way that I've learned to like bank in words, which I now do a lot, is I write in my notes app a lot
mm,
on my phone. So even the book Grown, I was touring a lot during that time when I was writing it for my other book, the previous book that came out. And so most of Grown I had written on my phone. I just transferred it into what program am I using now? Scrivener.
Oh,
So
got
I transferred it into Scrivener, and I had like several chapters written. So definitely just like it's not an excuse to just not have your laptop on you. You definitely have to just like use what you got. I may not suggest like, like a napkin at the restaurant because those never go off well. I've learned from my mistakes. But for sure, a notes app on your phone or on your iPad or whatever can definitely like take you much further. And
okay.
then I would also like, especially for those who have families and stuff like that, I would carve out a weekend that you go to a hotel. It doesn't need to be the Ritz-Carlton. It could be a Motel 6 and sit down and write. Like sometimes just stepping away and getting away from distractions. Like I'm one of those people who I need to have like my counter needs to be like completely clean. Like I'm one of the like I get really distracted by like anything in my house. Like all of a sudden, like I'll be doing laundry and there's no laundry that needs to be done right now. Um, so, so during this month, and especially because there's Thanksgiving,
Mm,
it's the kickoff of the holiday season. Make sure that one of those weekends in November, you take the time, like get it like start now. Like it's October. Make sure you get like the babysitters on call. Make sure your
mm,
hubby or whoever, grandmama's like helping that, like making sure you have that like time to really dedicate because one of the things that people make a mistake is like not considering your book a business.
mm.
And if your book is a business, your book is a job, like you would be working. Like, so consider that in and of itself. Like, I've also like cheated by like giving myself little bonuses. Like I put money away and I'm
Oh,
like, if I finish
yes.
this book, I get to take out this money, I get to spend it on myself. So I have bought myself clothes because I knew I finished this book. Like, so there is a reward. Like not only is Nano like, you finish the book like at the end of the month, you also get like a new sweater, like on top of it.
Double
So
bonus.
yes, novel bonus. Making sure like the one year I did it, I remember I made sure I set up housekeeping services
Mm,
and meal delivery services during that month because the time it would take to like cook and shop or wash the house or whatever, like I factoried that like I delegated that out. So, which is not always an option for people, but like, asking friends like come over, like, hey, can you walk the dog? Just 2, 3 times a week, takes like you take back your power there. So definitely making sure like, but if you do have the money, I would strongly advise to sort of like set up those systems. I remember I used to use this thing called like Factory. They would like send like meals that were, it'd be like 4 or 5 meals for the week. And that instantly was like great, like dinner or lunch or whatever. And I didn't have to
yeah.
like worry about cooking because I was able to kind of like focus on the novel. So yeah, those are like my bigger tips is like time, like just taking back your time at all costs.
It's amazing how much, even just like half an hour, saving half an hour with something like that. I mean, you could get out easily 1,000 words in that half hour, if not more.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Especially like, and I guess my last tip is to really have an idea of what you're actually writing.
That's helpful.
I feel I feel like some people have gone into Nano just like I'm just gonna write and pants away, and then like they spend half the time trying to figure out what the hell your novel is about. Like if you really like have like an outline, because I mean, what is we're trying to reach 50, no
50,000, and
50,000.
then every day it's 1,667, but some people like do it backwards or forwards, or there's a lot of different ways to do it, but at the end of the month, 50,000.
Yeah, so I always remind people like, you know, that first draft is usually like that 50,000, and you're going to ultimately add 30 more thousand words to it, or, you know, 100,000 words, whatever. Like it depends, or you may chip away from it. But knowing at least the notes and the like the basic bones of your book, and writing that outline before you get to Nano really, really will help you. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't pants. I'm saying like at least having like a general idea where you're going so you don't waste your time figuring it out during the month of November will definitely help you.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. There have been months where I'm like, I don't know what I'm writing on November 1st. Those years did not go well. So I echo your advice. Okay, so that's all the questions I had, but I have a fun little horror quiz that I think you might like if I can find it. I downloaded it.
Okay. Hopefully I won't fail this and this will be so embarrassing. But yeah.
I think you'll get some of them. I always try and make them kind of tricky because if they're easy, that's no fun.
You're 100% there.
Okay, let me just make sure this is gonna. Oh no, it's not gonna flip. Oh, I downloaded it wrong. Hold on. Let me just go to the webpage. And and share. Present. And share screen. Okay. I added this page this morning and I was like, this is scary enough. Yes. So we have our horror trivia. It's only 6 questions.
All right.
True or false, multiple choice.
Okay, let's do it.
The Michael Myers mask is actually a latex mask of what famous actor? William Shatner, Gene Hackman, Dick Van Dyke, Kurt Russell.
William Shatner?
Yes. Ooh. Oh no, I had a little. Okay. It's a little slower. Yeah, so there was no actual like description of what Michael Myers' mask actually looked like or what he looked like. So they came down to 2 options. One was a clown mask and the other was a stretched out Captain Kirk mask. And then they chose the Kirk mask because it was really eerie and creepy.
Yes.
But I wonder if they had gone with a clown mask, like
it wouldn't have flied.
No.
Yeah. Like clowns are creepy. Don't get me wrong. I hate clowns creepy. Like fully, but it wouldn't have been a legacy like it is today.
Yes, absolutely. So, true or false, The Exorcist was the first horror film to be nominated for a Best Picture Oscar.
I believe that's true, but
it is true.
Okay.
So you're doing great. 2 for 6 so far, or 2 for 2, yes. Yeah, so there's not a lot of horror movies that have gotten a lot of love from the Academy. So even though that's like a thing, The Exorcist earned 10 Oscar nominations in 1974, including for Linda Blair, who was only 15 in that movie, which is amazing.
Wild.
Yeah. What is the name of the demon in The Exorcist? Beelzebub, Pazuzu, Apophis, Thanatos.
Thought it was Thanatos.
It is,
but
Pazuzu.
Pazuzu.
So it's actually never said in The Exorcist. The demon that takes possession of Regan, his name is Pazuzu, which is taken from the name of the king of demons in Assyrian and Babylonian mythology.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know that one either.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is freaky. True or false? It took Jack Nicholson too long to tear down the prop bathroom door in The Shining, so they had to find a weaker, thinner prop wood to build the door.
False?
You are correct. It's actually the opposite. So because he worked as a volunteer firefighter, he took down the door too fast. And they had to use the real door. Killing it. In order to film the premonition scene in Final Destination 3, how many times did the actors have to ride the roller coaster? 13, 20, 26, 39.
I didn't actually see this one because I like roller coasters and I was like, this will like mess me up. I'm going to do an educated guess here. I'm going to say 26.
I believe you're correct.
Oh my God.
It does make going on a roller coaster seem a lot less fun.
Yeah, I was just like, no, I won't be able to do this.
No, thank you. Okay, last question. I had to make this the last one in honor of Weight of Blood. True or false? It is Sissy Spacek's hand that appears in Carrie's final scene.
False.
It is true.
Oh my God.
She was adamant that she be the one to do like the hand pushing through. So they actually had to bury her in order to get that shot.
Oh my gosh. That's so
right.
I was thinking it was false. Just based off other trivia I heard about this movie, but okay. Wow, that's amazing. Okay, well,
yay. That cool? Yay! That's all we have. I want to stop sharing. Perfect. Well, Tiffany, thank you so much for joining us today. I had so much fun talking to you. Please, everyone watching, pick up one, if not all, of Tiffany's books. They're all incredible. I also want to thank Catherine, who's been in the background moderating, and of course, our lovely NaNoWriMo monthly donors. Without you, these would not be possible. Yeah, so that is all. Thank you, everyone.